Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
Doc2Doc Lending offers personal loans up to $100,000 for doctors, designed to help you consolidate debt, invest in your goals, or get ahead financially. Founded by doctors for doctors, Doc2Doc makes funding simple, transparent, and tailored to the medical community. If you're in need of some funds, visit Doc2Doc at the link in our show notes. Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where we help physicians take control of their money, build wealth, and live life on their own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath. This is a special episode. I'm so honored to have Dr. Zwade Marshall back here today to talk about his work helping doctors start their own practices. And speaking of, as you guys already know, I've been diving into direct primary care, and I'm planning on opening my own. I'll be opening up Thrive Direct Primary Care in New York here soon next year. And for that reason, I have to make the difficult decision of stepping away from this podcast. I know you guys are going to do amazing. It has been an honor and a privilege talking to you guys and hearing from you guys. And I hope that I was able to provide you guys with a little bit of camaraderie, of knowledge, of more financial empowerment. The Frugal Physician will stay alive at www.thefrugalphysician.com. But I'll just be taking a little break from this podcast. As an aside, I am going to be starting a new podcast that's patient-facing, and I'll have all the information on that on the website. But for now, this is our last episode as I take a break to start my own practice. So let's dive into our interview with Dr. Zwade Marshall, who, as I mentioned, helps doctors start their own practices. So this is a very pertinent episode to me. And for those of you listening out there who are thinking about starting your own practice, let's talk about Dr. Zwade Marshall. He's an Emory and Harvard trained anesthesiologist and interventional pain specialist. He's also the chief medical officer of Regenerative Spine and Pain Specialists, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Doc2Doc Lending, a frictionless lending platform designed for doctors by doctors. So as you can see, Zwade has a lot of experience on how to start a practice, start a business, and run a business. So I can't wait to dive into this conversation with him. Let's go. Hey, Zwade, welcome back.
Disha, I am beyond honored to be here, especially at this episode for you. I can imagine that you're probably feeling a multitude of emotions. It's a transition. It's not the end of a chapter, because I'm sure you'll be back to share more of your experiences as an entrepreneur and someone that's opened your own practice. But the influence and impact that you've had to doctors through this platform, being able to share all of the stories, to build a community around those of us, like many of us are just scared, and we don't know, and we feel alone about managing through these decisions, thinking about what else is out there for us. How do we scratch all the itches of interest that we have? The burnout phenomenon is real. Financial hardship in primary care, especially in dealing with insurance payers and the folks that employ physicians and view us as widgets or cogs in a wheel. It creates a whole lot of just isolation and loneliness. So I hope that you appreciate, as someone who's heard your podcast and someone who's now on it as a speaker, the impact that you've had. And I'm certain that you're gonna thrive. And I hope to hear the first return episode when you're back online and live after you've got the practice established. But congratulations and kudos for a job well done. And I wish you all the success in this next chapter.
Oh my God, Zwade, you're gonna make me cry. That's the sweetest thing. You're 100% right about the mixed emotions. I mean, it's like letting go of a baby, of my child. But I've been reading business books, and what I've learned is that I need to as I take this new step, I really need to give it my 100%. I have this tendency to try to do everything all at the same time, kind of jack of all trades, master of none. And I really need to make this my Sistine Chapel, and just 100% focus on it and make it good. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And also, just being my own boss, like you said, this medical system is hard. It's hard. And no matter where we go, it seems it's the same problems. It's me trying to take care of people the best that I can, give them my all, and the same administrative issues where you need to see more patients, you need to do it in less time, and blah blah blah, right? So like I feel like DPC is the key to what I need to be a good doctor and impact my community.
So I think this is a brilliant and poetic start to this episode, because it's exactly what we want to address. And like, how do we empower doctors to make that leap? And what you're describing now is something that I've experienced myself when I was leaving my employed role at a large private equity-backed pain practice to go on my own. And there's a huge emotional decisioning that has to happen, and a clarity of focus and prioritization in terms of what are the things that I'm balancing today that I'll have to give up to do this and give it all the attention that it needs for me to be successful. Because too many of us underestimate what it takes to go out on your own. And it's a whole grass is always greener phenomenon that happens to some of us that are employed. And entrepreneurship is oftentimes glorified in our community, and the ugly underbelly is not spoken about enough. And what you're doing is a humility for the process. You have a humility for what will be required, and knowing that it's going to be challenging to think about the finances, the pro forma, the marketing, the early patients, the fee schedule. Am I going to do a subscription model, or people can just come in and pay cash? All of the myriad of things, they kind of are interwoven into this complex tapestry that leads to either success or failure. And it's hard to do all of that and think about guests for a podcast, the content for the show, the marketing of it, the sponsors of it. That's another full-time job. And so the clarity of focus that you have to say, I need to just kind of go in with both feet and be humble about all the things that I know and don't know, and the blind spots I need to kind of find in my rearview mirror to ensure that this is successful, is the best way to go about this process. And too many of us, I think at times, don't give the prep enough focus because we're so frustrated and we're so overwhelmed by the burdens of being a practicing doctor within this current healthcare environment.
Zwade, you mentioned your leap from the private equity owned practice into your own entrepreneurship journey. So tell me about that. Tell me about that transition and the difficulties you faced.
Sure. So I was recruited from, when I was at Harvard as an interventional pain fellow, I was recruited down to Atlanta. I knew I was going to come back to Georgia. I went to Emory for college and medical school. And I always felt like having a home court advantage was a good thing, because I was in a field that relied upon referrals. So I think the stat is about 65% of all doctors work near where they trained. And hence, I know it's going to have alumni peers from Emory in the area that'll refer to me. Yeah. So I moved back, recruited by this practice, and it had all the glitz and glamour of a big practice in the sense of I had a high base salary. I had a bonus that was also significant, and I had a path to partnership that felt fair and transparent. I was one of those academics at Harvard when I was chief that was pretending to be an academic. I hated publishing papers. I did not really enjoy teaching. I felt like the best teachers for me had like big cojones, where they'll let me do the thing in the operating room and they'll just watch from afar. I can make mistakes and they knew that they can reverse it. So they didn't micromanage. I found myself becoming a micromanager faculty member, and I hated it for me. I was like, I know I'm not doing this resident justice. So I didn't want to be in an environment where I was having to teach in that regard. And so with this group, the comp was good. What I found out pretty early on, though, was to the point you made of it's the metrics. And because I've got a hammer, there's an expectation that every patient I see was going to be a nail. So the tracking of KPIs, like how many epidurals did you do this week, this month, this quarter? Like I'll do whatever is required based upon the pathology of the patient that I see. But you cannot fit me into your pro forma a number of epidurals to be done if I'm seeing people that don't need epidurals, they need physical therapy. They need to have an anti-inflammatory and conservative measures and come back to see me in 6 months. And so I did not like the commoditization of medicine in that environment. The other things that I kind of began to notice were just the lack of decisioning around my skill set and time. I thought that I knew that I was the economy of Zwade in that practice was multiples of what I was earning. So while I was getting compensated well, the practice was making a lot more off of me. And I was bringing to them new referral sources because of my networks at Emory and elsewhere. I was spending a lot of time outside of the operating room, having dinners in the evenings, marketing and the like. And I saw that I was getting busier, but I also saw that the enterprise value for all of my efforts was benefiting someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think about maybe I can be successful on my own. Well, the fact that that group was private equity owned gave me a front row seat to the decisioning, the financing, the budget allocations to a practice that helped me to learn what it would be like to open my own practice. And so I felt like I was beginning to get the tools to not just feel comfortable clinically as a clinician, which was like my biggest fear, that I was going to leave this academic environment where I had all these mentors around me, to be on my own somewhere and just not do a good clinical job. Then also learning the business side enough to be able to open up and hire, recruit, retain, create incentives for my first, second, third, and 10th employee that would keep them staying with me, choosing the right EMR, the right contractors, the right design plan, the process flow for the actual practice. Where's check-in? Where's check-out? How do you order the meds? There were a myriad of touch points that required thoughtfulness that I took the time to really prepare for. Now, I'll share more in a moment about how I shared with my practice I was leaving and what the initial steps were for me to feel comfort in myself and with my spouse around the decision. Because you think about leaving a high six-figure job to go out and start from zero, and you've got real family obligations. You've got a partner in life who's expecting you to earn X because that's how you've been building your life for the last few years. You've got kids. You've got in my case, I'm from an immigrant household. I've got extended family members who also rely upon me for support. And I could not fathom taking a huge step backwards in income to go forward later. So I had to plan my finances very carefully to ensure that I had the ability to continue to earn a stable baseline income while I was building my practice. And there's some keys as well.
Yeah. So tell us how long were you with the private equity group?
I was there from 2016 to 2020.
Okay, so about 4 years. Okay. And then how did you start planning? Tell us about what you did.
All right. So as I began to get the itch and I began to look at space, I reviewed my contract first and foremost to see what was my restrictive covenants. Where are my non-compete zones? Was it based upon my primary location? And I was at 3 locations out of 22. Or was it based around all of the locations that they have? And then I'd have to kind of find a way to be 15 miles from each of those. I did that analysis first. And it's important that as you're thinking about leaving your job, you look and see what legal hurdles you have to cross before you make any real germane decision. And then I began to look at my schedule within my organization to see when I was most valuable to them. So Q3 and 4 especially are the busiest times for folks like in my kind of OR-based environment, because patients meet their insurance deductibles in the second half of the year.
Right.
And they get everything done before December 31st. So about 65-ish% of all of the revenue that I generate comes in the second half of the year. Mm-hmm. And my employer would loathe to lose me then. So I decided to announce to them that I was going to be leaving the following in 2020. I announced it in September of 2019 and said, look, but I'm going to stay through the end of the year with you. I'll give you 3 days a week for the next 2 months, and then 2 days a week for the following 2 months. but you'll pay me my same salary, because I will work hard in those days and ensure that you don't lose the volume of cases that I was going to be doing anyway, while I go over to my own practice and begin to develop and build that. And they couldn't say no, Disha. Like, they couldn't say no, because
Right.
if I just left, then they would have to figure out a way to kind of fill the likely $3.5 to $4 million of revenue that I was going to make for them.
Right.
So they agreed, in essence. And in the interim, I'd found space in a location that was outside of my non-compete. I hired a consultant to help me do what's called a market demographic survey, where I had a report generated on the median income for that neighborhood, the average age, payer mix, especially. I'm in an insurance-based world. You're going to be in a cash-based world. The two things overlap some, but the Venn diagram does not always overlap. In my world, I prefer to have the retired community that's Medicare with secondary supplement, or commercially insured patients that work at Delta, Amazon warehouse, and the like, because those payers pay well. So I want to have a pretty strong commercial insurance base. In the DPC world, having an older population that has some liquidity sees the value in getting quick appointments, being able to have direct communication with their doctor, and not the behemoth infrastructure of a call, a phone tree to get into the hospital system to get your appointments. Like, there's real advantages to a certain subset of patients, and ensuring that the market you choose to enter overlaps with your ideal customer profile is of the utmost importance in the planning phase. So I'd found an area called Fayetteville, Georgia, where there was no one like me in that community, but it was a fast growing community because of Delta. So I had a lot of flight attendants and pilots. The film industry in Georgia had moved to Fayetteville, so the film studios were here. So Marvel Studios and Tyler Perry Studios were all there as well. They've got the grip. So I don't love the celebrity patient. I think they tend to be more of a headache than it's worth. So I prefer the on-set manual laborers, right? The grip, the guys that do the set design. They get hurt all the time and need to see a pain doctor, and
Sure.
they're very compliant with recommendations. And so it was the perfect kind of makeup of a community for a practice like mine. And I did not have any strong competition within 20 square miles. So when I was started to do the 2 days a week in Fayetteville and began to market my services to the local primary care docs and the surgeons to refer to me, my schedule began to get booked pretty quickly. And that was the first inkling that I had of, this is going to probably work out.
I think that's so smart that you did such good market research. Where did you find a consultant that would do that for you?
So there are a couple of companies that do stuff like this for doctors. And many times you have to find someone that knows your area. So national firms can be okay if they have a local presence, but it's better to find a local shop. So in Atlanta, there are a couple of them. There's Jackson Healthcare that does a pretty good job. There's Markham Healthcare Consultants. And then there are just some of these folks that you hear through the community. And in my case, it was Crystal Markham was the consultant that I engaged, and Katie Rice. And they just did a fantastic job because I'd met them through my time at Alliance. They'd done some work for my employer. And so I'd met them through that, through those relationships.
So let's talk about the space. You said you found a spot. Did you rent or buy? Or what do you tell other people to do as they're starting their own practices?
Great. So it depends upon where you are in your income earning at the time you're making this decision. At that time, for me, I was 4 years out of training. I was making some money, but I did not have a lot of investable cash sitting around. So it was going to be a Herculean task to start a new business and buy the real estate that I was going to be having that business in. I couldn't afford to do both. I couldn't fathom the $1 million plus for the building itself. The build out was going to cost another $800,000. That's $2 million. And then the actual business expenses, the cash flow management, the equipment financing, all of those things. So I rented and did not buy. There's very good strategic decisioning around buying the building that you're going to be in, especially if you buy a building where you can have other tenants and you're gonna rent the space to your business at market rate, which generates value in that real estate for you for an exit later on, and just for value creation in your overall enterprise. That is an ideal scenario, but I think few doctors that I meet that come to us to borrow money can afford to do both. The other thing about doing it that way is the decision to buy a building or buy real estate, period. It's a very specific set of variables that you should be considering. The comps in the area, the square footage, the price per square foot, the rental market, the resale market. That's a different set of variables from building the business. Like I mentioned before, payer mix, average age, and income. What is the likelihood that you'll have an ideal scenario for both things to overlap to make it worthwhile, to make a smart business decision for the practice and a smart real estate decision? I didn't have the bandwidth to do that complicated of a matrix to then do both.
Yeah.
Here's the real benefit of renting in my case, that if you're building a medical practice in a commercial space, you are really truly enhancing the building's value to the landlord. And they know that. And if you know that, it should impact how you negotiate with them for a few key items. The first one is Tenant Improvement Allowance, TIA. That is an allocation that the landlord will give to you to build a space in their building. And it can be anywhere from $30 a square foot to $115 a square foot. In my case, I got $589,000 from my landlord
Wow.
to build out my space. It was huge, it was massive. But what did they get in return? They got a 10-year lease from me, which for them, it's extraordinarily valuable to have a stable tenant who's going to be there for 10 years, means that they'll give me more money in tenant improvement allowance. If a 10-year lease feels uncomfortable for you because you're not really sure you found the right market and you want to do a 5-year lease, you'll have to negotiate for less tenant improvement allowance because it's a math equation for them. They're going to give you less if you're going to stay there for a shorter period of time. I also was able to negotiate to have the time for construction, and then 6 months after I got the CO, certificate of occupancy, permission to move into the space, free rent. So it took me time to build up a patient base, to not think about paying rent while I don't yet have incoming revenue. And I was able to buffer that into the actual lease with the landlord. Now, I say this all like I'm an expert at this, but I hired a really good real estate broker and a really good real estate attorney. I probably spent, the broker is paid for by the landlord, number one, so that's not a cost to me. So you're not going to save money by not getting a broker. So get a broker. And the second thing is the real estate attorney probably cost me about $5,500, and he was fantastic. So you think of all the downside scenarios of catastrophe. In my case, COVID happened during the time I moved into the space. What happens when something like that occurs? Do I still have to pay rent if I can't see patients? Well, thankfully, we had a force majeure clause in my lease where, nope, no rent's being paid at this time because my attorney had thought of it. I want to caution listeners I think there's a prevailing sense for doctors often that we can do it all on our own. And in an effort to save money, we tend to not get professionals involved because we think it's going to take advantage of us. That's true sometimes. But if you trust your network, get good referrals and references to the professionals that you work with, they will save your life. Like, there are people that are as good at what they do as we are at medicine. A good transactions attorney, a good leasing or real estate attorney is worth his or her weight in gold, because you as a doctor could never imagine the things that can come up. And if your landlord is a big corporation, a REIT, a management company, they will kick you around like a rag doll because you have no idea on what you're talking about or doing in that negotiation. So having a good attorney there is going to be very, very helpful.
That is amazing advice. Yeah, I'm in that process now, and yeah, there's just so many things that we need to consider. So we talked about the space, renting versus buying. Are you at the point where you're considering buying yet?
I am. Yes. Now I am. The space that I just opened a new center and a surgery center a month ago. I didn't buy that one either. And I'll tell you why. I think, as if you're already in practice like I am, this is my third location. The rule of thumb that I tell my peers before you open a second or third location is that your first one should be at about 80% capacity, meaning your slots for new patients, your slots in the OR for new procedures should be about 80% filled. If you're at 80%, then growth is inevitable. You need to open another one because you're going to get to 90 or 100% pretty quickly. And you don't want to have patients waiting 8 to 10 weeks to see you because you'll lose referrals if that's the case. So don't wait too long. But if you do it before you're at 80%, you run the risk of having outlaid invested too much capital into growth, and you don't have the patience to return the money in that investment, right? When I got that third location, I was not yet at 80%. It was one of those like opportunistic deals where another doctor was going to default on their rent in the space. And so the landlord was super motivated to get someone else that was credible in. And I got sweetheart deal on the cost per month, the tenant improvement allowance. I got free rent for almost a full year as well. So I took the deal because I thought like, I'm not ready for this yet, but I should do it now. At this point in my career, I am actively building a real estate portfolio for investing outside of medicine. So I have commercial properties and retail properties that my wife and my trust acquires. And I would love to have a building that I work in. I love to own it as well. And so I'm only just now there, but I couldn't afford to do it a year ago.
Can we talk about the benefits of investing, of actually owning the medical practice tax-wise?
Oh, absolutely. So let me not pretend to be a CPA or a tax professional. So ensure you're getting good professional advice. But there are very few vehicles to mitigate tax liability for high income earners like doctors than real estate. If you manipulate interest rates, you're an investment banker, there's a ton of things that exist where they can hide money and pay capital gains taxes only. But the way the tax laws in the US are designed, you're penalized for being a W-2 employee. And the more you earn in this system as a W-2, the more taxes you'll pay, and it's hard to get out of those taxes. Real estate creates a very nifty vehicle. Ownership does. And the tax code is meant to incentivize real estate ownership in business, right? So you get deductions and ways to mitigate taxes on the construction, on the actual appreciation and value over time, on any interest that you pay on the mortgage, that's tax deductible as well. And then when you lease the space back to yourself, the money you pay in leasing back is also deductible for your business taxes.
That's
so
incredible.
It's there's a myriad of ways for you to do this. The other part of it is equipment that you buy for the business in a building that you own, you can do an accelerated depreciation. So you buy an X-ray machine for $200,000, you can take that $200K in the first year if you wanted to, or over the course of the next 5, if that's what your business needed as well. So real estate ownership for your business or just in general creates a set of very convenient mitigation strategies from a tax perspective.
This episode is brought to you by Black Swan Real Estate, led by physician investor Dr. Elaine Stageberg. Dr. Stageberg, a Mayo Clinic-trained physician, together with her husband Nick, has spent years building Black Swan Real Estate into a diversified, large-scale portfolio, now approaching $500 million across 2,000 doors. Now, through their Secure Freedom Fund, a 10% fixed rate of return offering, you can invest alongside them. The Secure Freedom Fund offers institutional quality real estate opportunities designed to deliver strong cash flow, long-term growth, and remarkable tax advantages. This fund is uniquely structured so that each investor can tailor it to their own individual goals. This fund offers a minimum investment of just $25,000, the ability to choose monthly cash flow distributions, or to elect the compounding option for higher overall growth, the option to exit the fund on your own timing, the flexibility to invest in your personal name, a trust, an LLC, or a retirement account, and so much more. If you're an accredited investor who's ready to diversify beyond Wall Street and invest with experienced, trustworthy operators who've been exactly where you are, visit securefreedomfund.com today to learn more. From there, you can review the slides, watch the webinar, and even book a call directly one-on-one with Dr. Elaine Stageberg. That's securefreedomfund.com. So let's talk about the actual steps you took to open your practice as far as workflows go, a patient care goes. Did you start writing standard operating procedures right away, or did you just sort of jump in?
I just started to jump in. So there's only so much preparation you can do. And I think there's also, we talked about how humble you're being in the process and focused and diligent in preparation. But it's also the opposite, where we can have analysis paralysis and think that we have to create a million manuals, an HR manual, a epidural manual, a urine drug testing manual, and then it's time to go. No, you got to fly the plane while you're building it, right? And it's terrifying to do. But a lot of times you'll go into the endeavor thinking that things will be one way, and it's only experience that teaches you that there's a better way in practicality that needs to be accomplished. And so I'll share that. First and foremost, the actual construction of the space is one thing that we didn't talk about yet. And so knowing what the space design looks like to enable the success of flow within the practice, because your waiting area size, the square footage, number of seats you have relative to the number of patients and exam rooms you have is a very important formula, all right? Because you don't want to have folks sitting in that waiting area waiting for an hour and a half, if knowing that you've only got 3 rooms to see patients in, but you've got 14 waiting area seats, right? So how you schedule your patients on the schedule should be commensurate to the size of your waiting room and number of rooms you have. And there are these project management engineers, they're called value engineering. That's a part of the design team and that have studied this. So they'll tell you the overall space has 4,800 square feet. You can fit 5 exam rooms in here, a doctor's office, 3 MA workstations, and a check-in, check-out area. The waiting area will have 8 slots. That's optimized for number of exam rooms that you have. So this is the kind of stuff that we don't know, that experts who do this, they really know this. And they'll work well with your architect on ensuring that your space design plan fits, the scheme fits the overall size and personnel for your practice before you begin construction. Then when construction starts, you're going to be thinking about value engineering, the things you can cut corners in some things, but you've got to spend on other things, right? So you don't want to cut corners on things like the actual exam furniture, the tables and chairs in the rooms that'll facilitate comfortable patient interactions. You want to ensure that the waiting area seats are not too low. I'm in a back pain world. If you have to sit down low and get up, they're going to be so uncomfortable. The depth of the chair, the height of the seat is important to think about. And if you're thinking about those things, you're already ahead of 90% of your peers, right? And so it's reflected in how the patients react on day one. I also knew that I wanted to have a design aesthetic that felt like the anti-pain clinic. And so you'll figure out what your brand looks like, Disha. But in the pain world, there's a perception that we're the dump. You come to see a pain doctor after your PCP has tried what they can, after the orthopedist has done what they can, even maybe surgery, after the neurologist has given you their neuropathic meds, and you're going to see a pain doctor for narcotics for the rest of your life. And so pain clinics tended to be dreary, drab, ugly carpets, smelly furniture, because the patients there seem to have no choice on where to be. They got nowhere else to go. I wanted my referral source to think of me higher in the algorithm. Send your hurting patient to me first, and I will decide if they need to go to see an orthopedic surgeon or a physical therapist. Let me control where they go. I'll take the burden away from you. Well, if I'm going to say that, the place has to look restorative. You've got to come in and think you're going to get better. So I had a designer who designs hotel lobbies to design my practice waiting area. And so I've got a custom chandelier in the main entry foyer. I have art that I commissioned from Linda Yee in New York with natural and nature themes, because it helps to calm and soothe pain patients. You'll see her work all in the exam rooms and in the hallways around. It's all meant to look like a place of restoration, which kind of up levels the patient's expectations, and it suits my medical degrees as well. I'm double board certified. I went to Emory and Harvard. I want to differentiate myself from the guy up the street. And so the design team helps you execute in the way it looks. And it's a source of pride that you'll get when you look at your building or your office and it says your name on the door, and the door's open and it looks like your dream place. It's worth it to spend the additional $35,000 in the design so that you feel a sense of pride going to work and knowing that your patients are impressed, your referral sources are impressed, your loved ones that come to celebrate you opening up, they look and say, wow, this looks like you. I always knew that when you went on your own, Disha, it's gonna look like this. Like there's those intangible satisfaction pieces that we can't quantify in the amount of money that we earn or the practice success of just going to a place that's yours that feels and looks like it reflects you. And so take the time in the process to ensure the practice does have your stamp on it.
I love that. I mean, yes, I definitely want my practice to look nice and comfortable and upscale. But let's be real, all that costs money. And, right? So let's talk about financing. You happen to be in that field. So please tell us, how do doctors get capital to start a practice when they don't have revenue yet and they're looking at losing their stable W-2 income to go into debt to start a practice?
Great question. One of the biggest mistakes that doctors make is they'll emotionally quit their primary source of income and then begin to look at financing and starting their next business. It's really hard for any lender to underwrite a loan for a doctor who's asking to borrow $500,000 or $1 million for this new business. And it's all based on a business plan of projections of number of patients that they'll see in the future. Depending upon your specialty, the banks can view that more favorably or less favorably. If they've got a lot of experience with folks within your field doing well, going from zero to something, you get a little more grace. So there are things that you do to mitigate it. Begin the process of applying for the loan while you're still employed. If you know if you're leaving your source of employment, sign up for a locums tenens gig where you have some cash coming in, and you want to have that on paper as part of your revenue stream or income. If you've got a spouse, have your spouse co-sign on the loan showing their income to help you with the qualification of it, because any underwriting process will require to see how are you going to pay the bill over the time while you're still waiting to get patients in the door. Right. So that's primary. Having a safety net of cash reserves. It's easier to borrow money when you have money. And it's such a weird fallacy, right? Like you right. think that if I had the cash, I don't need to borrow the cash. No, but folks, the bankers and lenders like to know that they're lending money to someone who's financially secure and they're not desperate for capital. So the more of a nest egg you have is better. And here's how you think about a nest egg of cash. It doesn't just have to be liquid cash in a checking account. Your 401k counts. Any whole life insurance, and I don't know how you feel about whole life insurance. I am personally someone that's levered whole life insurance for exactly this purpose. I've got term life insurance. I've got a bunch of insurance for MedMal, etc. The whole life is an investment vehicle where I'm storing cash, and I've got cash value in that policy that I can use as collateral to borrow a loan against. So if you got $1 million in a whole life cash policy, a bank will lend you up to $900,000 at a very low interest rate because they can see that you have the assets to pay off the loan if you needed it. So a part of how you position your liquid reserves is to save up some money. The goal would be to have about 6 months to a year of your living expenses if you're going to quit and start a new business from day zero. So you have that cash in a money market or liquid account, but you're also going to include in your application any savings, 401k, Roth, in life insurance, cash value, all as a way to show a higher tangible net worth, which will let the banks more favorably underwrite your loan so you'll have access to more capital. Now, let's say it's too late and you already decided to leave and you don't have a ton of money in savings and cash. Who would lend in that scenario? SBA does, the Small Business Administration. Will require a personal guarantee. And what does that mean? Should the business fail, then you're personally on the hook to repay them. So they can come after your home and any personal assets that you have. It should be your first choice to not have to personally guarantee loans, but it's okay to do it in the first, second year of your business. And as soon as you begin to generate revenue, you get them to take that guarantee off, because you want to have a separation of personal assets from corporate assets. And what do I mean by that? As you get further into your business, you start to think about de-risking. The doctor, Disha, does not want to be implicated and lose everything should something in the business not go well. And as the business begins to earn revenue, you should be taking your chips off the table, out of the business, into your personal but liability to remote accounts. You have to have LLCs, you have to have trusts, and ways to separate yourself from being a target from litigation, or even just from the business doing poorly later on. So part of how you do that is to get off of that personal guarantee. If you signed one at the outset of a loan, think about it for the next 2 years. Like when am I ready to get off of this guarantee? If you have partners later on that join your business, you don't want to still be the one on the hook personally if you've got someone else that's joined, and now they're benefiting from the sacrifice that you made 2 years prior, where you and your family are personally in the hook for anything that goes awry with that business.
Right. So yeah, so I just went through this process and I shopped around. First, actual business loans. Most banks wanted to see 2 years business history before they'd give me a business loan. SBA, I did look into, and they have startup practice loans. They tended to be in the 8 to 12% range. Currently, I mean, it seems to be about where most people landed with the business loans. I actually ended up going with, talk about putting your personal assets on the line. I went with a HELOC on my primary residence because I got that at 5.75%. And
Sure.
yeah, so what do you think about that? Is that a smart idea?
I don't love it. I don't love it for you, but it's the most efficient cost of capital. And if your criteria was I want to pay the least amount of money in interest on this loan, that is the most efficient way to do it. Okay.
I also like that I don't have to use it. I don't plan on using it, but it's there in case I need it.
Oh, that's perfect. No. That's brilliant. You always want to have sources of capital you can tap into for the unexpected financial drain, right? But here's why I don't think folks should use a HELOC as their primary source of capital to start a business. It's commingling something you've already worked hard to accomplish, that home. That's where you house your family. That's where you sleep at night. It's like gambling and putting your chips back on the table with the thing that's supposed to be yours and your family's. I draw a clear line. I hate that for myself, like, because I think about buying that first home, right? And what it took for me to get that home. Now I'm putting those chips back in on this business idea that I believe in myself, but what if? I don't want to have that risk out there. The other thing I'll warn about is overly fixating on interest rate. Think about the fact that in the example you gave, one was 5% and one was 12%. You've got a 7% spread in what you're paying in additional cost with one option. The option that has the higher rate has less liability for you personally. That higher rate is tax deductible off your taxes.
Right.
That higher rate is probably 1/10 of the revenue that you'll generate over the course of the next year in that business. So you get a loan for, call it $500,000. If the rate on a 10-year term loan is even 12%, you're likely paying less than $5,000 a month. All right, in principal and interest, and probably less than $2,000 a month in interest, $24,000 a year. How much is your projection saying you're going to earn in the first year, second year, and third year of your business? Do that math and see, is it worth it for me to look to save 7 points and maybe $300 in payments? But I'm putting this risk back on the table. And if I have no prepayment penalties as my business grows, I can pay off this loan faster anyway. So I caution folks to look at the variables that matter to them. I think more than interest rate, what's more important is cost in terms of cash per month in payment. So I'll mitigate a higher rate with a longer term loan. The longer the term, the less the monthly payments, the less pressure you have to make a big payment every month while you're growing and nurturing that business. And then you can create enough breathing room, especially because the interest is tax deductible and it's going to help to offset your taxes. I think it's not the variable that we should focus on when we get these initial early loans, especially if you can pay the loan off early without penalty.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess I could always take out a business loan too.
So the beauty of it is that you're in a position of privilege where you have access to capital in a HELOC, which is good to know that you have.
Right.
So then you can now negotiate for another loan from a position of strength and privilege. Like your contractors are not waiting for that loan to get approved for you to pay the bill. You can start to float and pay bills while you're waiting for the right loan to get approved and underwritten, and then you repay yourself after that loan goes through.
Yeah, I love that. So let's now switch to things that predict success. As you help other people start up their practices, what traits predict success in a private practice for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a couple of things. The most obvious and common one is prior success. If you're leaving your existing gig because you're clearly an outlier in performance and you're the alpha that's being treated like a beta, right? You're the number one producer, the top 5 producers in the company. You're outperforming your peers. And a part of why you're leaving is because you want to retain more of the value that you create in the work that you're doing. That's a very strong predictor of success. I think we often overestimate how many patients will follow us to our new thing. Patients are less apt to travel for their doctor now. They tend to they have inertia. They'll stay at the place if they replace you with someone else that's serviceable. They may romanticize the doctor that they missed and they love, but they're not going to drive another 30 minutes to go see that doctor that they miss and love. Enough of them won't to build a business around that. But having a strong base is extraordinarily important. If you're someone that's going out on your own because you were let go for production, and you're still wrestling with the why, and you think that it's because it's the man, they didn't understand how I practice. If you've heard the feedback that you're not productive enough, buyer beware, okay? Mm-hmm. Because it's really hard to suddenly develop the skills that'll drive revenue if you hadn't been doing that before. So prior success is a strong predictor of future success. The other things, are you coming with a team? Do you have a charge nurse, a practice administrator, a scheduler, folks who've done the job somewhere else before in that role that'll be able to take some of the burden off of you in making all the decisions? You want to have, it can be a cognitive drain if you're having to think about all the things we discussed already, and then EMR, scheduling, patient medication supplies, and all that. It's just so much. So having a team of folks who you didn't solicit from your previous employer, you advertised the role and you told them the ad was out there, right? They applied to the front door, and there was no solicitation that occurred. But you know that Jenny and you get along well. She's been with you at the practice for forever, and you guys have a good yin and yang, and she applies for that job and takes it and comes on board. That's brilliant, because it also helps to remove one of the uncertainties around whatever task it is that she's great at from being on your plate. The third thing I'd say is having access to capital. A lot of businesses fail because they just couldn't fund the next thing that would have prevented failure. So if you're capped out on the money that you have access to, you thought it was going to cost you $300,000 to start the business, and you've got $300,000, and you realize in the construction, in the launch of it, you've hired staff, the insurance payments are slow to come, and you thought you're going to get your first check within 45 days. It's now been day 90, and check didn't come yet, and you have no wiggle room to get that incremental 100 or 200,000 bucks, then you start doing desperate things. You start borrowing from merchant cash advance companies that'll charge you 170% APR. So now you've changed the master that you worked for from the old employer to this predatory lender who's going to take cash out of your business account every week, right? And so I see these decisions that are made, and you say, why would someone never do that? It's desperation. It's not a lack of knowledge of what it is. It's like they needed $200,000 to make payroll, or they would lose Jenny, who left her job to come follow you as well. And you owe Jenny a living wage every month. You got to feed her family as well. Well, if the money's not coming, where do you get it from? You do whatever it takes to get that money. You've got Jenny to agree to leave that practice with you, and now your payments are not coming in, and you've got to make payroll. And so folks tend to end up borrowing from wherever they can get the funds from, just because of its desperation, right? And so,
Right.
so having a buffer to whatever your expectation is on budget is going to be critically important for overall success. And the last thing I'll say is we've been trained to think of our patient as the only kind of client or customer within our working environment. And when you become an entrepreneur, you are serving many different stakeholders. So as much attention and diligence you spend thinking about that treatment plan, the blood pressure meds, the interactions, and the comorbidities, you've got to be really thoughtful about your referral sources, how you communicate with them, how you thank them when you're in the early stages of building that business, to say, thank you for the referral. Here's what I'm doing. You send gifts or treats, ensure that your staff goes out to liaise with their referral coordinators as well. Taking care of your staff, knowing who are the tractors compared to the trailers, right? Like in any good team, you're gonna have folks that are engines that are pulling the load with you, and others that you're pulling along. Incentivizing your tractors well, and being honest with yourself about who your trailers are, and not expecting a trailer to become a tractor, because they'll disappoint you. And if you put too much on their plates, know that that's not going to get done. And then you've got a vulnerability in your business. So having a general awareness of assessing people, aligning incentives with motivators, knowing that this nurse that came with you is close to retirement, and a part of why she's coming is because you're only open 4 days a week right now. And if you get to 5, you don't want to ask her to work the 5th day, because she's going to leave. So having in the back of your head, you got to hire another one when you get to that capacity point. So it's always being aware of those things, and taking a step back to be a leader who's both strategic and tactical, but doing as much as you can to remain strategic. You should have someone that's not sending minutia decisions up to you. You should be able to kind of stay grounded in what the big picture is, where the overall practice vital signs are, so you can make strategic decisions about growth, about investment, about budget, about cost constraints, and always knowing where your effort delivers the highest value of return for your business.
That sounds like a lot that I need to learn. And thank you for putting that out there, because these are the things that we don't have to think about as employees, right?
No.
And and there is a yes, entrepreneurship is glorious, but there's a lot that comes with being the CEO, being the business owner. So let's talk about some of the positives. What's the most rewarding part of physicians building their own practices in your eyes?
I think for me, it's autonomy. It's autonomy of how I practice. It's autonomy over my time. When I take time off, I have the ability to take time off whenever I want to, but I can't necessarily, because of what the business requires from me as well. But at least I get to say yay or nay. And that has become so much more important and valuable to me as I age, as my kids are getting older, I've mortgaged my youth studying to be a doctor.
Right.
And then I'm a doctor, and in an employed practice, I don't have control over so much of my time, that just having the ability to say timeout and knowing I can do that, it's comforting for me. So autonomy is the first. The second thing is knowing that the ceiling on my income is a lot higher, where if I invested more time and effort, I'm rewarded with revenue that goes like this. In an employed practice, there's a ceiling that's much lower, and incremental effort does not get you enough more income. And for many of us, we've got to be honest on whether or not the ceiling that we're in is actually high enough for us to have a meaningful life, where sure, you're working for someone else, but you're funding your kids 401k, your kids 503b. You're paying for the home and the private school tuition. You're traveling on good vacations. You're investing in the stock market. You've got private assets. Maybe you're happy, and seeking more adds a layer of stress that may not be worthwhile for where you are in your life. But for those of us that are dialed into entrepreneurism, that's not our issue. We know that like there's the thing about ownership that's helpful. The last thing I'll say that's been a really strong benefit for me is that I get to use so many different parts of my brain and develop strengths and competencies in places I didn't have them before. So, and the most rewarding part is the people part, right? Like when I go to work today, there are 47 people that rely upon me doing a good job to feed their families. It's a lot of responsibility, but you also see this team begin to collaborate and coalesce around your vision that is extraordinarily fulfilling. And there are moments when my employees refer their loved ones to see me, when I take care of my nurse's mom, right? Or the spouse of my scheduler. And you know that like they can go anywhere, but they said like the doctor that I work with, like I trust him to take care of you. It's the best compliment in the world, and you feel so fulfilled from it. And then the last thing is, it's Thanksgiving time right now. My kids, my wife, kids, and my mom, we host a Thanksgiving lunch for my staff where they cook and then serve lunch to the staff. And seeing my kids come in and see their dad's name on the door, and you see them say they give a little speech and say, "Thank you for being here with my dad. We're grateful for what all of you do." And they're now older. They're 8 and 9, so they're even more thoughtful in how they articulate their gratitude to my team. And my team, they've known them as itsy bitsy kids, right? It's now been 4 years, so they're now 9. And so when my son was 5, is when my staff met him, and the reward of them knowing that dad goes to work every day somewhere where he takes care of people, and that seems really busy, but what he does matters. And you see the people that work with him, and and they're able to see that there is that hard work and effort results in something that's tangible. And you think about, how do you inculcate a sense of resilience and grit in your children when they don't have the same challenges that we had as kids, because we're obviously higher earners than maybe our parents were. And there's something that I love about them seeing the work and then the reward and then the people that are impacted by that work. And I did not have that same pride when I was an employee at my old practice. And so, money aside, the feeling I get, and I'm going to have it on Wednesday when we go serve lunch to my team, it's immeasurable, right? And that goes with the countless birthday cards from patients that, "Doc, I know it's your day to day. We want to say that we're grateful for whatever you've done." It all adds to this feeling of just purpose. And we know now that happiness is really tied to having purpose in what you're doing and feeling as though what you do matters to someone beyond you. And when you own your practice, the sacrifice and those bad days and the anxiety about paying the bills and all those things, it's all worth it when you have that feeling that comes from being purpose-driven and knowing that the people that you work with appreciate what you do, and the patients that you take care of also benefit from your work.
Zwade, thank you so much for helping me end this podcast on such a positive note. I feel like I've learned so much, and I hope The doctors out there listening who might be thinking about starting their own practices have more actionable things they can do having listened to this episode. And the doctors who aren't quite thinking about starting their own practices, maybe you feel a little inspired. Guys, the world is changing. The world of healthcare is changing. It's time to take the control back. It's time to be our own bosses. This is what we were meant to do. And I'm so very excited in this new turn of the healthcare landscape where doctor ownership is really coming back. Zwade, I'm so very grateful to you for providing your insight to me and to my listeners. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about Dr. Zwade Marshall or find out more about Doc2Doc and their lending platform, please take a look at the link in our show notes. If you enjoyed this episode and this podcast, please leave a review and share it with your physicians. The recordings of this podcast will be up. Please make sure to keep sharing it. And if you have any comments, email me at thefrugalphysician@gmail.com, which I will continue to check intermittently. Please stay in touch. I'm going to be around. I'm just stepping away for a little bit so I can focus on my practice and really get it going. Make sure to keep checking out thefrugalphysician.com as I plan on documenting my journey of starting this practice there a little bit as well. And I'll try to send out an email when I put up a new blog post or any new content so that you know it's there. So guys, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for listening to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast at The Frugal Physician. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, signing off just for a little bit. Stay frugal, y'all.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.